Super Tuesday, the biggest day in the U.S. electoral calendar so far, resulted in a big win for former Vice President Joe Biden and the establishment wing of the Democratic Party that he represents. Biden carried 10 out of the 14 states in play, while independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who was the frontrunner going into Super Tuesday, is on track to win the other 4, including the state with the most Democratic delegates, California. So, with the contest for the Democratic nomination now essentially a two-horse race, which of these two men has the best chance of defeating Donald Trump in November? To debate this, I'm joined from New York by Linda Sarsour, national surrogate for the Bernie Sanders campaign and author of a new memoir, We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders. And here in the studio by Lindy Lee, a Democratic delegate candidate and member of Joe Biden's policy and outreach team. Thank you both for joining me in the arena.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Linda, let me start with you. Just a week ago, or even I could say just a few days ago, Bernie Sanders was going to be the runaway winner on Super Tuesday. He was the front runner in the race for the Democratic nomination. And yet, on Tuesday, Joe Biden won the votes. He won the most delegates, won the most states. How disappointed were you on Tuesday night as you saw those results coming in?
I wouldn't say that I was necessarily disappointed because I started to see the writing on the wall. Watching over the weekend the coordinated, kind of dropouts of Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and them coalescing around Biden, I think it was easy for anyone who's following this race to see what was going on. So going into Super Tuesday, particularly after the big win for Biden in South Carolina, I knew that it was going to be an uphill battle. I was pretty confident in crushing it in California, which is exactly what happened. I was hoping that we would win also Texas, but because of us coming very close to winning, we are also going to be sharing a lot of the delegates in the state of Texas. So yeah, I wouldn't say disappointed. I would say that I kind of saw the writing on the wall as we went into Super Tuesday.
Lindy, it was obviously a great night for Joe Biden in terms of a quote-unquote comeback from where he had been. He had a pretty disastrous start to the campaign, coming 4th in Iowa, 5th in New Hampshire. And yet, even after this success on Super Tuesday, it's still pretty neck and neck in terms of number of delegates. 60% of delegates are still to play for. This is nowhere near done.
But I don't think we haven't seen this sort of comeback in a very long time. It's truly incredible. And I think the American people are speaking, and they're saying, we don't want a candidate whose staff and supporters are rife with toxic individuals. And I know there are so many supporters out there who are good, decent people who just want a better life. But we can't have a candidate who isn't making an effort to build a broad coalition that brings many different ethnicities and communities together.
You don't believe, Linda, that the former Vice President of the United States, who will probably end up having the support of Barack Obama, has all of these other candidates coalescing behind him. You don't believe he's the safe choice against Donald Trump in November?
Absolutely not. I think he has a horrible record. He took us into a despicable war in Iraq and voted for the war in Iraq. He didn't just vote for the crime bill. He championed the crime bill, which is why we have inflated incarceration of Black and brown people across the country. He's been working for the last 4 decades to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I don't want to just defeat Donald Trump. I'm tired of the status quo. I'm tired of maintaining what we have. I want health care, Mahdi. That's what I want. Joe Biden right now hasn't told me what his message. What is he fighting for? What are his top policy issues other than defeating Donald Trump?
Let's bring in Lindy and make the point. Is a candidate like Joe Biden, who is so similar in many ways to Hillary Clinton, is that the right way to go, given we kind of tried this approach in 2016, the Democratic Party tried this approach in 2016 with a kind of quote-unquote moderate centrist who has the support of the party, has the support of African-American voters in the primaries, and then look what happened to Hillary Clinton.
So speaking as a young person whom Bernie Sanders claims to be his base, I was turned off by Hillary Clinton in 2016. Joe Biden doesn't turn me off in the least. I'm inspired by him. I'm inspired by his goodness. And I voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016 in the April primary in Pennsylvania because of his focus on campaign finance reform. But over the years, I realized that I was kind of deceived. He's not who he claimed to be.
Okay, let me bring in Linda. Lindy made the point about young people. So let me just ask you this question. The Bernie Sanders campaign has been focused, laser-like, on turning out young people. This was the big argument. Vote for Bernie Sanders. He will energize people who don't vote. He will energize people from minorities. He will energize young people. On Super Tuesday, earlier this week, that didn't happen. In fact, in a lot of the states, youth turnout was lower in 2020 than it was in 2016. Surely that's a really worrying sign for your campaign.
Yes, Mahdi, you're right. Do we need more young people to get off social media and go to the polls? Absolutely. but to deny the type of communities that Senator Sanders and his team have engaged. I mean, we have seen unprecedented turnout from Latino voters who have given Sanders commanding leads and wins in places like California and Nevada. To see the inspiring satellite caucuses in Iowa of Muslims and former refugees who are getting up to vote for Senator Sanders. And can more be done? Always can more be done. But let's be clear, Mehdi, we have no super PACs. We have 0 billionaires that have given money to our campaign. We have had major PACs going against us. You know, the Democratic Majority for Israel was running ads against us in all these states. We have anti-Bernie ads all over. We had Mayor Bloomberg putting up ads against us. I mean, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy here, but for young people who are not politically engaged, it seems like that to them.
Okay. Lindy, isn't the problem that at least a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren are putting out ambitious proposals, whereas your candidate has put out the least ambitious proposals of all the major candidates on health care, for example? He didn't go even as far as Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, who left the race. He hasn't really talked much about policy or how he's going to change America. He's just said, you know, vote for me so we can get normality back, so we can go back to a pre-Trump era. But that's not enough for a lot of people.
Well, I would probably moderate that a little bit and say he is putting out ambitious proposals. For example, his ideas on climate change, and he's very, very aggressive on gun violence. Gun violence is, for me, an existential threat, and I know so many voters in America feel the same way. Joe Biden is someone who, helped pass the assault weapons ban, which has been shown to reduce deaths by gun violence. Bernie Sanders voted against that multiple times. In addition, he also voted to prevent gun manufacturers from being held accountable. I don't want a candidate or a president who's being supported in the past by the NRA. It's just unconscionable that Americans walking down the street today cannot. You
didn't, just a very quick clarification.
Yes,
you didn't feel that
absolutely.
way in 2016?
My vote for Bernie was not, as I mentioned, wasn't a vote for Bernie. It was a vote against the establishment. And the 27, at that point...
But why are you now with the establishment?
I don't consider myself...
You don't consider Joe Biden to be establishment?
I'm the granddaughter of illiterate rice farmers.
Not you personally. You don't consider Joe Biden the candidate you support to be establishment?
There is no establishment. I think this is almost like a myth. If there were truly an establishment, Bernie Sanders wouldn't have been able to get as far as he did.
Okay. But you just said you were against the establishment in 2016. Now you're saying there isn't an establishment.
Against Hillary Clinton. Against,
okay. Linda, there is no establishment, Lindy says.
I mean, there's absolutely an establishment, and that's the thing, the kind of conversation, an honest conversation that we're going to have during this primary elections, and as we get to the convention, and then trying to coalesce our party or unite our party to try to defeat Donald Trump. We cannot deny the realities. We cannot deny that there are still second ballot superdelegates. There are still party officials who are able to, coordinate endorsements and put money into PACs and endorse certain candidates and have influence on the party. So to say there's not an establishment is I think, not something that's going to help us bring the party together. We have to realize that the reason why Bernie Sanders has gotten as far as he's gotten is also to listen to his voter base. His voter base does believe there's an establishment. They believe that they are disrupting the political system in this country.
Lindy.
To say African Americans who voted in droves in support of Joe Biden as his establishment is just so disingenuous. These people are suffering. These people are middle class or lower class citizens. They are not the establishment. It's just to label them as corporate trash, like they have been on social media and by Bernie Sanders supporters, is just extremely hurtful and not representative of the real situation.
Lindy, every voter matters. African American voters matter. Latino voters matter. So this should not be a conversation, and I hope that your candidate does not support pitting up voters against each other, to say that African American voters are more important than Latino voters, or Latino voters
no one
being
is
more
ever
important
saying
than
that.
African American voters.
Absolutely
the
not.
Establishment, the establishment is not the voters. The establishment is the billionaire donors. It's the PACs. It's the party officials.
To say that
those are the establishment.
It's incorrect to say that Bernie is not supported by super PAC money when he is supported by dark money groups whose disclosures won't be disclosed until after Super Tuesday, and we have no idea who his backers are. There's no transparency, and where are the medical records, by the way? We have a 78-year-old man who just had a heart attack, and there's no transparency, and he promises transparency, he promised disclosure, and we're not getting it.
Let Linda respond.
First of all, Bernie Sanders has provided what he believes to be his full medical conditions at this moment, and I will not answer for him on that particular situation. But you should be very careful, Lindy, representing your candidate, in calling groups like the Center for Popular Democracy, Democracy for America, the Dream Defenders, a young Black people-led group in Florida. You're calling dark money groups people-led organizations that have been doing progressive work on behalf of all of us, some of them for the last 3 decades.
Lindy, let me ask you this. You mentioned Bernie Sanders' health. Here's a candidate who had a heart attack during the race. He will be the oldest president ever elected if he wins. That's clearly a concern to some Democratic voters if you look at the polls. But another concern is with your candidate, Joe Biden, who for a lot of people seems to be in cognitive decline in front of our eyes. Here's a candidate who makes gaffes on a kind of daily, weekly basis, including on Super Tuesday, who can't remember basic things. It's not as if, you could argue Bernie Sanders has health issues, but a lot of people say both of them do in their own ways.
Joe Biden has struggled with a stutter all his life, and you're
not just a stutter, you know that.
You're from the United States.
He doesn't remember the people that are standing next to him. I'm just saying it's not just a stutter. He does have a stutter. But for example, Joe Biden 3 times in February said that he got arrested in South Africa trying to see Nelson Mandela. He then had to walk that back. That wasn't a stutter. That was a lie.
Well, we can call out Bernie on his many lies too.
We could, but I'm asking you. I'll put that to Linda in a moment.
I think we would be disingenuous to say that politicians don't shape the narrative. Everyone does it. It's and I think that just.
So does that mean you're okay with Donald Trump also shaping the narrative?
Absolutely not. But Donald Trump is not shaping the narrative. He's eviscerating the narrative. There's a much difference, and I'd rather have a good man who is America's best interests at heart than Donald Trump.
Linda, what do you do about the socialism label? Because a lot of voters say in polls, including Democratic voters, that they're worried about this socialism label. That's why a lot of the party elites don't want to get behind Bernie Sanders, because they genuinely think it will destroy him in the general election, that the Republicans will go after him over Castro, over Venezuela, over Soviet Union. What's your response to that charge?
Because your show is worldwide, I'm actually embarrassed, because in other parts of the world, someone like Senator Bernie Sanders would be seen as a social democrat, would actually be seen like center-left. Bernie Sanders is not a socialist. I'm a socialist. He's not a socialist. He's a democratic socialist.
Lindy, let me ask you this very briefly.
I'm from communist China, and they call themselves, socialism with Chinese characteristics. That's the official Chinese motto. They killed my great-grandfather. So socialism for me strikes fear into my heart. It's a family trauma here. I do not take that term lightly. And what are we going to do about the many instances in which Senator Sanders praises communist Russia? He goes to Russia and comes back and says, I don't see any
What would you say to
deprivation.
people who say Joe Biden praised Hosni Mubarak, said he's not a dictator in the middle of the Arab Spring?
Americans do not have a deeply rooted sense of disdain for Hosni Mubarak versus socialism.
Okay, that's a political point, but in terms of the morals of it, we're out of time, and I do need to ask you both this question. Linda, you said in an interview last month, because of the experiences you've had online, in particular with some Bernie supporters, you said that if he were to become the Democratic nominee, you said you would not vote for him.
Absolutely not.
So that means you would be, voting Trump, sitting at home?
I'm going to vote blue all the way down, except for president.
So you're okay with a second Trump term?
I'm absolutely not okay with it, but I'm also almost probably equally terrified and traumatized by the prospect of a Sanders presidency right now.
To the point where you would be okay with a Trump second term?
I'm not okay with it.
Well, by definition, you would be if you didn't.
I'm fighting like hell to make sure that Biden is a nominee.
I accept that. I'm asking a hypothetical, which I will also ask Linda. If it is Bernie Sanders a nominee, you will not vote for him, even if it means a Trump second term. Okay. Linda, are you a Bernie or bust, as some people on the left say? Is it Bernie Sanders or no one else for you?
So this is the translation of what I got from what Lindy just said, is that she doesn't care that Donald Trump will be able to appoint Supreme Court justices over his next 4 years and literally take us back maybe 50 to 100 years. So that's what you're saying, because you're saying that you're not
What is your view,
Linda?
President. Linda, what is your view? Are you Bernie or bust, as the saying goes?
I've never been Bernie or bust. I'm not going to lie to you. I might have drew the line at Michael Bloomberg, but I know what's more important. It's not about my little feelings. It's not about being selfish and self-righteous. It's about protecting our communities and protecting generations to come. And I would hope that someone like Lindy would be part of that movement, but I guess she's not.
But just to be clear, you would vote for Joe Biden if he's the candidate come November?
It would be very hard for me, Mehdi, but I would do the right thing. But I would do the right thing, because that is the right thing to do.
Lindy, last word.
You have a candidate who's espousing Medicare for all. He doesn't know. He went on Nora O'Donnell the other day, and Nora's like, how much is it going to be? He's like, I don't know. You don't know. No one knows how much health care is going to be. It's completely, he's being a con man if he cannot provide concrete proposals of specific numbers.
That is not a justifiable reason why you would not vote for a Democratic candidate to beat Donald Trump, Lindy.
He's selling us a pipe dream.
It's not
a
a justifiable
in the sky.
Point. But he's not the lesser of two evils, in your view?
He's not.
Okay, on that contentious note, we'll have to leave it there. Linda Sarsour, Lindy Lee, thank you both for joining me on Upfront.